10% of
Yeah.
people, and majority of those, that 10% men, never apologize for anything.
Yeah, that's right. And
So
so,
talk to me a little bit about what those the apology languages are, because I know that I've encountered that where I said, well, I'm
yeah,
sorry. And
yeah,
they're like, sorry isn't an apology. I'm like,
yeah.
well, what is?
One of our deepest emotional needs as humans is the need to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. And I think what this book does, it helps us communicate love in a meaningful way. And what I discovered years ago is what makes one person feel loved doesn't make another person feel loved. So you can sincerely be loving them in your mind, and they're not getting it emotionally. And so I think because the love language concept helps people understand that I can't just do what would make me feel loved. I've got to learn what makes them feel loved, learn their love language. So I think that has helped people be successful, whether it's a marriage or whether it's a parent-child relationship, successful in meeting that deep need for love.
How did you learn that? How did you discover that people received love and had a different love language than perhaps you thought they had or that you were practicing?
It actually grew out of my counseling. I remember the first time I encountered this years ago. The couple came in and sat down and started talking, and the wife said, the problem is I don't feel any love coming from him. And he said, I don't understand that. He said, I do everything I can to show her that I love her. Well, why would she say she doesn't feel loved? I said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I get home from work before she does, so I start the evening meal. Sometimes I have it ready when she gets home. If not, she'll help me. We eat, I wash the dishes. Thursday night, I vacuum the floors. Saturday, I wash the car, I mow the grass, I help her with the laundry, and he went on, and I was beginning to wonder, Maria, what does this woman do? It sounded like he did everything. And he said, I did all of that, and she says she doesn't feel loved. I looked back at her, and she started crying, and she said, he's right. He's a hard-working man, but we don't ever talk. We haven't talked in 20 years. He's always mowing the grass, washing the dishes, doing something else. And I knew here was a sincere husband who was loving his wife the best way he knew how, and the wife was not getting it. And after that, I heard similar stories over and over in my office. And I knew there had to be a pattern to what I was hearing, but I had no idea what it was. So eventually I took time to sit down and read several years of notes that I made when I was counseling and ask myself the question, when someone said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories. And I later called them the 5 love languages.
Now, are there more than 5 love languages, Dr. Chapman, or do you think everything boils down to these 5 ways of expressing and showing love?
Well, I was not dogmatic when I wrote the book, but these were the 5 that I discovered. Now, since then, people have suggested other things. For example, one man said the 6th love language is chocolate. I said, well, if you bought it, it's a gift. If you made it, it's an act of service. So far, the things that people have suggested to me seem to me to be dialects within one of these 5 languages. And so, I'm still not dogmatic. Maybe there's a 7th, a 6th or 7th, but so far, I haven't found one that doesn't really fit into these 5 as a dialect within that language.
Now, I think it's interesting that you said these 5 love languages work whether you're in an intimate relationship with another human being, whether you're a parent. For example, I asked all my children to take the test so I could better understand their love language. And I know you have a separate book about the workplace, but did it surprise you that families started to use this to help them foster deeper connections within the family? Like I have one son who really likes gifts and another one who it means absolutely nothing to him at all. And he likes physical touch and time. And so I love him in a different way, or I show my love, I guess, in a different way. So did it surprise you that people started taking this into their parenting, into their friendships?
Yes, what happened was after the first book came out and couples started using it, they said to me, does this apply with children? And can you help us with this? And so then I wrote the book, The 5 Love Languages of Children, same 5 languages, but applied the child-parent relationship. And so, yeah, that grew out of that. And I knew in my counseling the same thing would apply to children, and that children do have a primary love language. So that didn't surprise me when they started asking those questions. Actually, in the first book, the original book, I had a chapter on how this works with children. And the people were saying, give us more, give us more. So I wrote a whole book on that, kind of how it applies with children.
Do you think that love languages can change over time? So you may want in your 20s or 30s, you may have a different love language than in your 50s, 60s, or 70s?
I think like many personality traits, the love language tends to stay with us for a lifetime. But having said that, I think there are seasons of life and circumstances when sometimes another love language will jump to the top. For example, a mother who has two preschool children, acts of service may not have been her primary language, but during those years, it's probably going to jump to the top because she's overwhelmed. So yes, I think there are seasons of life and certain circumstances where another love language will jump to the top momentarily. But I think basically it tends to stay with us throughout a lifetime.
Now, I think the other book here that I have, The 5 Apology Languages. Talk to me about why you felt that was important to separate out on its own, and how is that different, and what do you think that does, helping people understand how to apologize in the field of love?
That book began in the mind of a counselor who called me to make an appointment. And when she came in, I knew her, from a distance, but I didn't know her well. And she said, Dr. Chapman, I've been using the 5 love languages for several years now in my counseling. But I believe people also have an apology language. I said, what do you mean? She said, I think that what one person considers to be an apology is not what another person considers to be an apology. And I think people are missing each other. And as soon as she said it, I resonated with it, because they've been sitting in my office for years arguing over whether or not one of them apologized. She would say, I would forgive him if he would just apologize. And he would say, I did apologize. And she would say, you didn't apologize. I told you I was sorry. That's not an apology. So I said to her, I think you've got something there, but we have to do some research. And let's make sure that this is really true.
And what did you find out in your research about apologies?
Well, we asked thousands of people 2 questions. When you apologize, what do you typically say or do? Second question, when someone apologizes to you, what do you want to hear them say or do? And their answers fell into 5 categories. I promise you, Maria, we were not looking for 5. I like 5, but we weren't looking for 5. But they fell into 5 categories. And so we call them the 5 apology languages. And the basic idea is that we learn to apologize from our parents, typically, or we learn not to apologize. We found that about 10% of the population never apologizes for anything, and most of them are men. And they were taught by their fathers. Real men don't apologize. And we think they got that from John Wayne.
That's so fascinating. 10% of people, and majority of those, that 10% men, never apologize for anything.
Yeah, that's right. And
so talk to me a little bit about what those the apology languages are, because I know that I've encountered that where I said, well, I'm sorry. And they're like, sorry isn't an apology. I'm like, well, what is? I'm confused.
Yeah, well, it's one apology, one way to apologize. We call that expressing regret, often with the words, I'm sorry. But always tell them what you're sorry for. I'm sorry that I lost my temper and yelled at you. And don't just say, I'm sorry. Tell them what you're sorry for. And also don't put the word but. I'm sorry that I lost my temper, but if you had not, then I would not. Now you're blaming them. Right. But expressing regret is trying to communicate that I feel badly about what I've done and or what I failed to do. So expressing regret. Another is accepting responsibility. I was wrong. Should not have done that. No excuse for that. I accept full responsibility. And some people have trouble with this, and particularly people who grew up in homes where they did not get affirming words. They were told many, many times that they were wrong, wrong. And something in their psyche said, if I ever get to be big, I'll never be wrong again. And so they have a hard time saying I was wrong, but it's simply accepting responsibility for your behavior. And then the third one is offering to make restitution. What can I do to make this right? And for some people, this has never crossed their mind. But for other people, this is what they consider to be a sincere apology. And if you don't offer to make things right with them, then in their mind, you're not sincere. And then the fourth one is expressing the desire to change your behavior. That is, that you can say some of these other things, but if you don't say to them, I don't want to do this again. I don't like this about me. Can we talk? Can you help me get a plan so I won't do this again? And that to them is a sincere apology, because if you're not trying to change your behavior, how could you be sorry? So sorry doesn't mean anything to them. But if you express in the desire and you get a plan, I'll just give you a short example. A lady said, Gary, my husband was taking care of our baby, about 18 months old. The baby was crying. He got mad with the baby, shook the baby, and I grabbed our baby and said, don't do that to our baby. And I ran to the bedroom just sobbing. And she said several minutes later, he came and knocked on the door, walked in the door and started crying and said, I can't believe I did that. You know I love our baby. I don't ever want to do that again. Can you help me? We get a plan so I won't do that again. She said, Gary, I sensed he was so sincere. I sat there and talked with him, and we came up with a simple plan that if he ever felt he was about to lose his temper with one of our children, he would say to me, honey, I'm hot. I got to take a walk. And I would know what that meant. And I'd let him take a walk to cool off. I'd take over with the children. Then he would come back and plug back in. Honey, thanks for letting me take my walk. Now I'm under control. And she said, he's never lost his temper since. It was 8 years ago. Never lost his temper with our children since. So for some people, if you don't offer to make things right or to change your behavior and show real effort in doing so, their judgment is you could not be sincere. And then the last one, which was never on my radar, is simply requesting forgiveness. Will you forgive me? I thought if I'm apologizing in any manner, wouldn't you know I want to be forgiven? But some people are waiting for you to say, will you forgive me? So those are the 5 languages apology languages that we discovered. And most people can identify with one of those. Now, sometimes people will say, well, I'd like to have, a couple of them, but they judge sincerity by the one that's most important to them. And if you don't apologize with that language, in their mind, you're not sincere.
Wow, that's so fascinating, because all of these things are about communication, right? Communicating so that somebody feels love, whether you're the parent, the child, a friend that works in a friendship relationship, a colleague at work, an intimate partnership, and apologies, because it's impossible to think we won't have ruptures in our relationships, right? And
absolutely.
That we're not taught how to make amends, so to speak, how to rectify the situation. Everybody has a different way of doing that.
Yeah, and when you discover what their apology language is and you apologize in a way that's meaningful to them, it makes it much easier for them to forgive you. The apology doesn't restore the relationship. There has to be a response to the apology. And that the response that really restores the relationship is forgiveness. And I like to emphasize, forgiveness is not a feeling. Forgiveness is a choice. It's a choice to remove the barrier that was created between us over this event. And so you remove that barrier, so now our relationship can go forward. You may still feel hurt. You may still feel angry. You may still feel other emotions. But forgiveness is not an emotion. Forgiveness is the choice to remove the barrier so our relationship can go forward.
Dr. Chapman, you've been counseling couples and families for multiple decades. What are you seeing now? What's the difference in relationships today, 2023, compared to 10 years ago, for example? Marriages, families, friendships. What is the big difference that you see that you didn't see perhaps 10 years ago?
I think one thing is that technology has obviously influenced relationships. Some for the good, some for not so good. And I think sometimes particularly friendships, we spend more time texting each other than we do talking to each other face to face or even on the phone. And I think communication, has really gotten worse instead of better. particularly person-to-person relationships. There is no substitute for sitting down with the person, looking at them in their face, and they're looking at you, giving your undivided attention to that person to process life. There's no substitute for that. Now, technology can be wonderful. When you're deployed, for example, or you live a long ways apart, yes, texting and FaceTime and all those things are wonderful. They can enhance relationships. But if we're married to the screen, we're probably going to have a marriage that's not doing too well. So I think that's the big difference that I've seen. Fundamental things are still basically the same. We need love, need to feel loved. We need to deal with our failures. I usually call those the two essentials to long-term healthy relationships. Meeting the need for love and making sure that you deal with your failures. Otherwise, you build a wall between the two of you. Every failure is an emotional block in a wall between the two of you. So I think I would say make the most of technology, but don't let technology control the relationship.